Welcome to Cuppa GAO. This is your coffee break with our experts where we sit down and answer your questions. I'm Sarah Kazmarek. We are parked roadside today with GAO's director, Susan Fleming, from our physical infrastructure team. Susan, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Sarah.
So, for those of you who are just tuning in, we're talking about auto recalls. I'm here, Sarah Kazmarek, with Susan Fleming. And I was just about to ask you, tell me a little bit about your background and the work that you do at GAO.
So I work on surface transportation issues, really looking at federal programs and policies, really aimed at trying to move people and goods safely and efficiently.
And I know this isn't the first time your team has looked into issues with auto recalls. So tell us a little bit just about the scope of the impact here. How many people are affected by auto recalls?
You know, there's been a dramatic increase in safety recalls. In 2011, it was about 13 million vehicles, and last year it jumped up to over 51 vehicles. And the jump is really due to the fact that there's a couple of large-scale recalls out there. Most people are familiar with the most recent ongoing recall, which is the Takata airbag inflators. About 34 million vehicles are currently subject to a recall. 19 manufacturers are involved, and about 13 deaths have occurred so far.
Wow, so 51 million vehicles subject to an auto recall in 2016. So there's definitely a lot of people out there, and probably folks watching here, who have had a recall on their car. We're going to jump into questions soon, but I know your team released a report yesterday on this topic.
We did.
Tell us about some of the highlights out of your most recent work.
So we were trying to look at a couple of things. One, we wanted to understand, how do consumers want to be notified if their car is subject to a recall? And then what factors do they consider when they decide whether or not to take their car in to have the problem fixed? And lastly, where folks can go to find out information to better understand whether or not their car is subject to a recall. And at the website to really understand how easy is it to find and use this information.
Well, thanks everybody who is tuning in to our live chat. I'm Sarah Kazmarek. I'm here with Susan Fleming, a director on our physical infrastructure team. We are parked roadside today to talk about all things with auto recalls. Please remember to like and share this video, and also send us your questions. So if you have ever received an auto recall, or if you have questions about an auto recall, we want to hear from you. So please write in the comment box, send us any questions you have. And again, like and share the video. So one of the things you mentioned that you looked into with this report is how people get notified in the first place about an auto recall. So what did you find there?
So manufacturers are required to send a written notification if someone's vehicle is subject to a recall. But folks also are interested in we basically ask consumer focus groups, are there other ways that you'd like to be notified? And folks still want to get that written notification in the mail, but they really would like to get also an electronic notification. They want to get an email or a text. Some manufacturers do that. In fact, one told us that they routinely send out an email right before they're going to send out the mailed notification, kind of giving consumers a heads up.
So if you want to chime in on your preference, we are actually running a poll on Twitter. We have it pinned to the top of our Twitter page, that's at USGAO, where you can tell us how you like to get notified about a recall, if it's by letter, if it's email or phone, and we'll talk more about that poll later today. But when I looked at it recently, it looked like it was sort of what you were saying.
A mixed bag.
Yeah, a mixed bag of people. Some people do want letters, some people do want that email or text or phone call as well. So for those of you just tuning in, we are talking about auto recalls. If you've ever been impacted by a recall, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. And if you know anybody who's been impacted by a recall and might find this video helpful, please like and share the video. And I want to also ask you about how people, what do they do after they get a recall notice? How do they decide, do I take my car in? Do I get it fixed? Where do they go from there?
So as I mentioned, we talked to focus groups. We conducted focus groups across the country, and we really wanted to understand for consumers, what are the things that lead them to decide whether or not to take their car in to have the problem fixed. And overwhelmingly, it was really their sense of urgency. Is this a really high potential risk for them to drive their vehicle, the safety risk? And the second was the convenience. Am I going to have to drive 2 hours to take my car in to have it fixed? Am I going to have to be with my kids at the dealership all day? And so I think it was really those two things, the severity of the problem and the convenience for folks.
Well, and I'll admit, I think if I had a recall on like my windshield wiper and I had to take my kids with me to the dealership on a weekend to deal with that, it wouldn't be the top of my list necessarily, but then again, I guess even a windshield wiper could lead to a bigger problem potentially.
The federal agency that oversees recalls, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, they don't prioritize. To them, everything is a safety recall because it may not seem to be a problem now, but obviously you need to have your windshield wipers work if it's inclement weather, and so they want everyone to bring in their car. And cars are manufacturers are required to fix the problem at no cost to consumers. While some folks feel that there's other costs still involved for them, transportation costs, maybe having to pay a babysitter. Manufacturers are also trying to think of innovative ways to address those as well. For instance, they're trying to provide loaner cars for folks. They're also trying to maybe have extended hours and do some of the repairs off hours as well.
So we have a question here from Eden, and she wants to know, if your car is recalled, does that mean it's not safe to be on the road?
It means that there is a problem that needs to be fixed, a part needs to be replaced, and it can pose a safety risk. And so it just means that you really need to contact your manufacturer or dealership, take your car in, and like I said, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration does not distinguish between the windshield wiper or the wiring problem or the Takata airbag. So it means that your car has a problem that poses a safety risk and that you really should take it in. That being said, unfortunately, about a third of all vehicles are never taken to the dealership to have the problem fixed. So there are folks that make a determination that because of convenience or because they view it that it's the windshield wiper, I'm just not going to deal with it right now.
Sure. I mean, we have a few more people who just jumped in and joined us. Thanks so much for everybody who is tuning in to Cuppa GAO. We are here taking your questions on all things auto recalls. We're parked out in front of our building here at GAO to answer all your questions. I'm Sarah Kazmarek. I'm here with Susan Fleming, a director in our physical infrastructure team. Her team just released a report yesterday on the topic of auto recalls. And you were saying earlier that over 51 million people are impacted by auto recalls these days. So if you've been impacted or you've got questions about whether your car is subject to recall or where to find information, we're here to answer your questions. Please do send them in just right on the comment box to this live video. And also you can like and share the video so that more people can join the conversation. And you were talking about, we had a question earlier on if your car is subject to a recall, is it safe to be on the road? Let's say you don't know whether or not your car is subject to a recall. Where can you find that information?
A couple places. You can go to your manufacturer's website, so Honda, Toyota, the Pontiac, all those different manufacturers' website. Or you can go to the federal government's website, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, that's NHTSA.gov. And there's a lot of good information available to consumers. You can perform a number of searches. You could search using the 17-character VIN number, which, by the way, is located at the bottom of your left side windshield. It's also in your, most likely on your insurance card or your registration. You also can search using your vehicle's year, make, and model. And lastly, you could sign up for an email alert, so that way you would know if your car is subject to a future recall.
So I know your team also took a look at just how easy it is for people to use and navigate the government website where they can find this information, and that your team had a couple of recommendations for how they can improve it just to make it easier for folks to use. What did you find there? What were you recommending?
So again, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, has a lot of good information on its website. What we wanted to understand was, for consumers, how easy is it to find and use that information? So we asked, again, the participants in our focus groups to perform certain tasks. And in general, they found the website pretty easy to use. However, certain tasks, they found it a bit challenging. For instance, that email alert that I just mentioned, folks said it was really buried in the home page. It wasn't easy to find. And then that search to look at the vehicle's year, make, and model, really you have to understand certain acronyms, and they found it very confusing. You almost needed a glossary in order to do the search. So our recommendations are really aimed at trying to address the difficulties that consumers had when going to NHTSA's website and trying to perform certain searches or tasks.
And so, again, that's the website where you can go and look up if there's a recall on your car. And it was just confusing in some places to figure out what you're supposed to put in.
Or where something was.
Okay. And then also, it was hard to find just even on the homepage. If I want to sign up by email to get notified about a recall,
it's important to be able to find it.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks everybody who is tuning in and joining us. We are talking about all things auto recalls today on Cuppa GAO. I'm Sarah Kazmarek. I'm here with Susan Fleming, a director on our physical infrastructure team. We have a question that just came in from Joseph, and he wants to know, can you explain how something gets recalled nationally?
So the manufacturer or NHTSA can require a recall. It usually stems from the manufacturer, like for instance the wiring problem that we just talked about, or their wiper. They would notify NHTSA that there's a problem, and then they would send out the required written notification and post that on their website, and NHTSA would as well. So it really stems from the manufacturer. Sometimes it's just basically consumers complaining about an issue. Then there is a critical mass, and then they suddenly realize that, hey, this is concerning, and so therefore we want to take a look at it and we want to replace that part. Other times it's like with the Takata airbag. It's unfortunate that I think the number of deaths and the number of serious injuries resulted in the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and, quite frankly, Congress holding them accountable.
So it sounds like sometimes it depends on the circumstances or how many people are involved in that decision to make a national recall.
And this is something that the federal government is trying to use data more effectively to try to look for trends earlier and to try to work with the manufacturer. So I think that was not quite in this scope, but the Inspector General at the Department of Transportation has a series of reports where they've really tried to hone in on this particular issue.
And we have a question here from GAO ourselves. Someone is asking us on our side, who pays for repairs due to a recall? Me, the government, or the auto manufacturer?
So the manufacturer pays for either the repair to the vehicle or a part replacement. It is 100% the manufacturer's responsibility. And that does, again, it could be from something very simple to the complex Takata airbag inflator issue.
So for those of you who are tuning in and joining us, my name is Sarah Kazmarek. I'm here with Susan Fleming. We are taking Cuppa GAO parked on the road to answer all your questions on auto recalls. So please do keep the questions coming. If you have been impacted by an auto recall or you have any questions about it, we absolutely want to hear from you. So send us in your questions right in the comment box, and be sure to also like and share this video. We were just talking about who covers the cost of auto recalls. So let's say my car is subject to a recall and I'm going to take it in. Am I spending my money on that, or the auto manufacturer has to cover it?
The manufacturer would pay for whether the car needs to be fixed or whether there's a replacement part. But again, we heard from some of the consumers in our focus groups that that's fine, but there are other costs that they may have to pay. And for some, if you're in a rural area, the dealership may be a 2-hour drive. Or if you have young children, you may want to pay for a babysitter while you're waiting at the dealership. or if you have a job and you have to take time off work. So for some, there's other costs that are involved as well. And like I said earlier, manufacturers are trying to look at how to address some of those issues. Providing a loaner vehicle for the consumer, trying to have off hours where they don't have to then have to deal with the babysitter or take time off work. So I think manufacturers, to their credit, are trying to think outside the box a little bit and to hear some of the consumers' concerns for why they aren't bringing in their vehicles to have the repair fixed.
So let's go back and talk again about how you get notified about whether or not your car is subject to a recall and what people's preferences were there.
So manufacturers are required to send a written notification in the mail, but some go beyond that. And we did hear from consumers in our focus groups that while they still would like that written notification, they would like to have an electronic notification as well. They would like a manufacturer to send that email or a text or actually even a phone call. And like I said earlier, manufacturers, some of them at least, are trying to do that. One told us that, hey, before we send out the written notification, we email folks. And the federal government is in the midst of trying to look at ways to provide more of an electronic notification. And again, that would be in addition to the written mailed notification.
So if you are watching now, how do you prefer to be notified if your car is subject to recall? We want to hear from you. So you can go ahead and write in the comment box, tell us if you prefer email, you prefer written, if you want to get a text, how do you want to be notified and why? We'd love to hear from you and talk about your comments and questions. And so it's kind of a mixed bag of, some had said in the focus groups that you did, they wanted to be notified by mail, some on email or by text or phone. And then in the focus groups that you met with, how did they decide, okay, I'm going to go get my car fixed?
So for them, it really was two issues. It really stemmed from their perception of how urgent the problem is. Yeah, it's a windshield wiper, I can wait. Or it's a Takata airbag, I better bring it in. To convenience. Geez, I'm wondering, I live in a rural part of the state. The closest dealership's 2.5 hours away. Or I have 2 young children. Am I going to have to get a babysitter, or am I going to have to sit at the dealership all day? So it really comes down to the urgency of the safety risk, of the safety recall, or the convenience to them. And that's what they use to determine whether they will take that car in to have the problem fixed.
So we have a question here from Billy, and Billy would like to know, what happens when there is a recall and a fix is not available? I've seen instances where it took 6 months to a year before a remedy is available.
So unfortunately, that is the case, particularly as we know that Takata airbags, that is, there are people like myself included still waiting for that airbag inflator. But the manufacturer is still required to notify consumers if their car is affected by a recall. So you will still get that written notification saying that your car is subject to a recall. And in my case, what I'm doing is I'm just kind of periodically bugging the dealership to make sure that it's still on my radar and to get a sense when my airbag inflator will be in. But it is unfortunate because of the sheer volume. As we mentioned earlier, there's 51 plus million vehicles that are affected by recall. 34 million of those are the Takata airbag inflators. So I think it's just such an ongoing problem right now, and the sheer volume is causing some people to have to wait a little bit to get their car fixed.
And Joseph has a question. He would like to know, if one takes a vehicle in due to a recall, are the dealerships obligated to do the work first or wait?
So it depends on if the part is available. You should have a sense. Sometimes the written notification will let you know where things stand about your particular problem and whether or not it's currently available. Or you can call your dealership. They should be able to tell you that. But I think there is a lot of information out there so that you aren't wasting your time, quite frankly, and just show up at the dealership. So I would, you could go to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's website, your manufacturer's website, or call the dealership to make sure before you just show up that your part is there. And my understanding for the Takata airbag is that they are really making headway with those airbag inflators.
And so if the part is there, then the dealer's obligated to fix it.
Absolutely. Absolutely they are. And if it's not there, they still are obligated to fix it when the part arrives. I think it's just, there may be a lag between the time that somebody may get the notification letter to when that part is actually at the dealership.
And then Kelsey wants to know, if I get a letter, but it says parts aren't available yet, again, what do you do?
Yeah, so it's the unfortunate, you now know that there's a problem with your car, and that you need to have it fixed or repaired. I think for the majority of them, the part is available. I think it's the Takata airbags right now that is the one that people are having to wait. But I'm just calling the dealership, or they're calling me, quite frankly, and where my husband got his fixed last week, and I think I'm next on the list, hopefully.
Yeah, I know we just got a recall on our van, and they don't have the part in yet, so we're kind of in the same boat of wait and see when they get it in.
Yes.
So for everybody who's just joining, I'm Sarah Kazmarek. I'm here with Susan Fleming, a director in our physical infrastructure team. We took Cuppa GAO on the road. We're parked talking about all things auto recalls. We've gotten a few questions in. We'd love to answer any questions that you have about anything with auto recalls. How do you get notified? What do you do if you do get notified? So any questions that you have, please send it to us just through the comment box on the chat. And be sure to also like and share this video as we get the word out about this live chat. So you've mentioned a couple times the website, and let's go back to talk about that information, where people can go and look up if there's a recall on their car.
So you can go to your car manufacturer's website. So in my case, it would be going to Honda, or you can go to the federal government's website. That's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA.gov. And there's a lot of good recall information available to consumers. You can search using your VIN, which is a 17-character number located on the lower left side of your windshield, or it's in on your registration, or in many cases on your insurance card. You can also do a search using your vehicle's year, make, and model. And lastly, you can sign up for email alerts. I've done that, and that way I know I'll get an email saying, hey, your car's subject to this type of recall. So those are the things that you currently can sign up for or do a search on the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration's website.
Thank you for that recap of where you can go and look at information on NHTSA's website to see, okay, is my car subject to recall? We'll follow back up on that more in a little bit, but I want to turn to a question here we got from Sarah, who wants to know, do recalls cover cars not made in the U.S., like my Toyota manufactured car that was made in Japan, even though some models were made in U.S. factories? And then she also wants to know, since it looks like, sorry, the rest of the comment kind of cut off. I think she's saying that it looks like we're doing carpool karaoke. I guess maybe you can say, I don't think carpool karaoke, maybe just
we'll lose everybody if we start doing that.
About auditors and automobiles. We'll take the first part of your question though.
Right. So the answer is yes, as long as it's basically any vehicle that involves a U.S. consumer. So it runs the gamut. As I said, the Takata airbag affects 19 manufacturers. So it would be everything from your Hondas and Toyotas and Teslas and to American manufacturers. So it's millions of cars. In fact, the 51 million number that both Sarah and I cited earlier in terms of the number of cars impacted by a vehicle, it's roughly 1 in 5 cars that are on the road in the United States has a auto recall right now, ongoing auto recall. So yes, it's absolutely affects many manufacturers, and again, at no cost to the consumer to fix the problem.
All right, so I'm going to go next to a question from Joseph, who wants to know, if a recall is in progress and you get into an accident and then the airbag creates more injury, so maybe the airbag was part of what was subject to the recall, what can you do about that issue?
You know, that's a tricky one. It's not something we delved deeply into, but I definitely would contact both the manufacturer and the dealership, and make sure you want to make sure that your airbag inflator is safe, that it wouldn't cause any harm to you or anyone else. So I think you want to just make sure that whatever problem you're experiencing needs to be fixed, because they've also with the newer models of the airbag inflator, there's been some adjustments along the way too. So I think it's such a serious problem. I wouldn't hesitate to contact the manufacturer dealership in this case.
So for those of you who are tuning in, we are out parked in the car talking about all things auto recalls. I'm Sarah Kazmarek. I'm here with Susan Fleming, a director in our physical infrastructure team. For those of you who maybe are new to GAO, we are the Government Accountability Office. We audit all things with the federal government to make sure that they're spending taxpayer dollars wisely. And in this area, we're looking at the government's role with auto recalls. We've talked about the NHTSA website where you can go and look up if your car is subject to a recall. And I know your team made some recommendations to improve how easy it is to use that website. Tell us about those recommendations again.
So, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of really good information on NHTSA's website about auto recalls. And what we were trying to understand from the participants in our focus groups as to how easy is it to find and use this information. So we asked them to perform certain tasks, and generally they found the website easy to use. But in performing some specific task, they had some difficulties. For instance, to try to sign up for that email alert so that they would know whether or not their car was subject to future recalls was really buried in the homepage. It wasn't easy to find. Another task was to search using the vehicle's year, make, and model, and it required understanding of certain acronyms and was very confusing. They felt like you needed a glossary in order to perform that search. So our recommendations are really aimed to try to address the difficulties that consumers had in using the website.
So it sounds like just making it easier to sign up and get notified, and then also
the searches,
to be able to search.
Yes.
Right? Because everybody should be able to know whether or not your car is subject to a recall. So again, if you have questions, send them in. We've got time for a couple more. I would like to know, kind of taking a step back, what would you see as the bottom line that you found out of this report?
So there is with recent surge in the number of vehicles affected by recalls, and the fact that at least a third of all cars will not be repaired or the problem won't be fixed, it really is critical that consumers can access and use publicly available information about safety recalls. It really could affect their life and the safety of other people's lives.
Well, Susan, I want to thank you so much for coming and talking with us today.
My pleasure.
And joining our series of Cuppa GAO. It was great to have you here and to talk about all things auto recalls. If you want more information about this work that Susan's team has done, you can find it on our website, gao.gov, and look for GAO-18-127, and you'll see the report just came out yesterday, so it'll have just the latest information on this. And then if you watch this and you still have questions or you want to get something answered, you can shoot us an email to opanewmedia@gao.gov, and we'll be sure to still get you an answer there. And again, please be sure to like and share this video, and we will post a copy of it to our page after we're done. And thanks everybody who tuned in to join us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to sit down, have coffee with us, and ask us your questions about auto recalls. So we hope you tune in to the next segment of Cuppa GAO, and we'll see you then.
Bye, everybody.